back.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it on?
Should be, that's a bit too low for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on. I'm just going to go into the booth and do the levels, but you can start.
So I'll really talk about the strong secular democracy, dictatorship going with the stability. That's been my theme.
Yeah. You can leave the big screen. Okay.
Good afternoon. The mic's not on. Good afternoon. Is the mic on?
Use this one, Charlotte.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. Can everyone sit down? We'd like to get started.
Sure.
Thanks so much for coming this afternoon, hurrying your lunches down to get to this session where we're going to be asking the question, can democracy and peace go hand in hand? We're very privileged to have these three speakers with us today, who of course have experience not only of democracy, but all three of them have experience as dissidents within their home countries. And let me first introduce Benjamin Pogrund, who was born in Cape Town and was deputy editor of the Rand Daily Mail when it was shut down in 1985 because of its opposition to apartheid. After several years in Britain as a senior journalist, he moved to Israel in 1997, where I'm sure many of you are familiar with him as the founder of the Yakar Center for Social Concern in Jerusalem. His latest book, which was published in July of this year, was called Drawing Fire, Investigating the Apartheid Accusations in Israel. To his left, we're very pleased to welcome Basem Eid, who was born in Jerusalem. He spent his first 33 years in the Shuafat refugee camp on the outskirts of the city. During the first Intifada, he became a prominent figure. He worked as a senior field researcher for the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, before going on to found a Palestinian human rights organization called the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group. He's written extensively about human rights violations by both Israelis and Palestinians. And he recently gained attention for an article he wrote calling for extensive reform in UNRWA, the UN agency which assists Palestinians in the territories. And finally, I'd like to welcome a man who for many of us is a living Jewish legend, Natan Sharansky, a former prisoner of Zion who spent 9 years in a Soviet prison. After his immigration to Israel, he assisted in the aliyah and the absorption of many other immigrants from the former Soviet Union. He turned to Israeli politics and served in 4 successive Israeli governments. He was both a minister and deputy prime minister. And among other books he's authored, he co-wrote, together with Ron Dermer, The Case for Democracy, The Power of Freedom to Overcome of the Jewish Agency. But first, on the question of whether democracy and peace can go hand in hand, we'll turn to you, Benjamin Pogrund.
Thank you. Well, the subtitle is also a strong secular dictatorship can ensure stability. Two go together, obviously. And when you look at it, it looks good, sounds good, sounds almost like motherhood. And we have the proof of it, that it does work and it is good. We have the examples of Mubarak. Yeah. We have the examples of Mubarak, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. They were all dictatorships and they all ensured stability. and they were accepted to the world because of that until a pretty late stage. But stability, that word is a difficult one. What is stability? They ensured that people could walk the streets during the day without being worried about murderous rioters killing them, that they could probably sleep reasonably comfortably at night and not worry about thieves. They had some reasonable livelihood, perhaps. That was stability. Very welcome, very needed, very wanted by people. But the question is, as human beings, is that sort of stability enough? And it obviously isn't. We're people. We want more than that. And that's why Mubarak, Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein are no longer with us as leaders, because people wanted more than the stability they offered. And indeed, the stability they offered in their dictatorships had the seeds of their own destruction built into them. Because to ensure the stability, they had to control people. So people could not sleep all that well at night because they had to fear the knock on the door. They did not have total freedom to breathe freely, to read what they wanted, to talk to whom they wanted. More and more, to ensure stability, the dictatorships had to control the lives of their people. So they ultimately rose up against them. We talk about democracy being linked with peace. And again, it sounds good, and for democracies, it's true. Democracies basically don't go to war with each other. And this is held out as a good reason to have why you need democracy. There's another side to it, because the democracies might not war with each other, but they go to war with others and use their powers to suppress others. And in this country, in my lifetime, Kenya, Cyprus, among other places where Britain did some very awful things, and as we know with America, the giant superpower, Panama, Cuba, a disgraceful situation for all these years, Vietnam, you name it, Belgium, the Belgian Congo. All the major Western countries have been stained by this. So they talk democracy, but it's for themselves in this little group of countries. It does not go further. So that again raises questions about the whole concept. Well, there's another factor in regard to my part of the world, our part of the world, what is called the Arab Spring. Now, I'm not sure about this. As far as I know, that is not an Arab concept. The phrase came out of the West, out of basically, it was expressing a Western concept, expressing Western hopes and expectations transferred to others, what the West wanted to see happen. Now, Basem and I, we talk a lot about this between us, and he wants to say something more about it later on, about the Arab Spring. But apart from that, when we talk about the Arab Spring, you've got to remember there's no monolithic Arab entity. It doesn't exist. Even the Muslim world, hostile against Israel, well, yes and no. Some more than others. There's no unified entity. They determine their actions by their own self-interests and their internal problems and wars and everything like that. And the same with the Arab Spring. It was a concept that applied to a lot of different countries, very different countries, some of which don't really, they exist almost as cardboard countries. What probably unifies them is their loyalty to their national football teams. But go beyond that, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq were created by collusion between Britain and France after the First World War, and they are beset by family, clan, tribal loyalties inside, and religious increasingly, between Sunni and Shia. The Muslim world, the Arab world, is totally fractured, and they're going in different directions. You've got Egypt at the moment, which seems to have some form of stability, but again, as I say, self-destruction is built into it, and they can keep the lid on, but for how long? 6 months, a year, 20 years? Tiny spaces of time in human history. They can't survive, it's impossible. And then you've got Tunisia, which had its elections last week. Possibly good things will come out of that. But the point is, it's for the people in these countries to decide, not for other countries to dictate and to say, you must be, quote, a democratic country like us or whatever it might be. It's for those people to decide. And there are huge social forces at work, based on economic, political, religious factors, a host of factors. And people outside, to some extent, can advise, can guide, and certainly the function of the people outside is to help the refugees who come out of these situations. Because unpalatable as the thought is, in the whole nature of things, these countries are emerging, they're bursting forward, bursting out, and there's going to be bloodshed. There has to be, in the whole nature of the world and them. And all that anyone can do is stand by and put out a helping hand to them, a bit of guidance if it's asked for. People criticize President Obama and the US for not having done anything about Syria, about Egypt. I don't believe they could have done anything. Syria, they could have perhaps intervened at a very early stage on the side of the rebels, and they didn't. But Egypt, what could America, Britain, anyone in the world have done with those colossal forces building up? And the final point that I want to deal with, because all this is very relevant to where we are, because this idea that you must have a democracy to have peace with is used sometimes by people who use it as an excuse for not making peace with the Palestinians. Look, they're not a democracy. How can you make peace with a democracy? It's got to lead to war. Well, that's an insidious argument, a false argument, as I believe totally. And of course, we also ourselves, Israel, in our own way, have disproved it, because we have signed peace treaties with dictatorships, with Egypt and Jordan. And again, we don't know what's going to happen next year, even next week. But so far, for quite a few years, it's been a cold peace, but there has been peace. So I cast a big question mark over this idea of dictatorships are vital to ensure stability. Short term, yes. For next week, no. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Basem Eid.
Yeah, thank you very much. Everybody hearing me? Oi. What's this?
You put it on your shoulder.
No.
I meant oy vey.
Yeah. Okay, probably I will start from my friend Benjamin stopped. I remember after the visit of Anwar Sadat, the former Egyptian president, to Israel, he was interviewed by one of the journalists. One of the questions was from the journalist to Sadat, how many Arab countries in the world? Then Sadat said one. This is Egypt. The journalist asked, what about the others? Then Sadat said, the others are tribes with flags. In my opinion, he is totally right. Because I tried to check my own roots, and I found that I belong to a tribe which came from Saudi Arabia. All the Arab nations should be considered as tribes. And in the tribes culture, there are only two important fundamental ideology, which is hatred and revenge. And that's very difficult, in my opinion, to change is such kind of culture. So when we are talking about peace and democracy, I think that most of the Arab people consider these two words as a Western culture. It's not an Arab culture. And when you become a believer in the West culture, so you must have to be considered as a godless person. This is how the Arabs and the Muslims looking to me as an example, as a person who is fighting for the human rights. On the other side, I think that the Arabs never ever believes in democracy and human rights. Because the Arab culture is much more based on the Quran. And I don't remember ever that it was mentioned in the Quran the word democracy or human rights. I read all of the Quran, by the way, as a Muslim, of course. But I never noticed it's such important two words. Even in our universities, I can say probably till the beginning of the 90s, there is no mention for the words peace, democracy, human rights, and pluralism. Now, I'm looking today what is really surrounding us, especially in the Middle East area. It looks like that we reached what I call it the Muslim World War. This is exactly the period where we are living in. Today, Sunnis are against Shia, Daesh is against Al-Qaeda, Syria is killing its own inhabitants, Hamas is against Fatah. So when you are looking to the map, it looks like a one big Muslim world war. So if we are living under such kind of situation, I think that everyone should have to be so worried, especially the secular Muslims, by the way. Because the secular Muslims are much more wanted by ISIS, much more than the Jews and the Christians. Because these people are the real godless people. So where we are going right now, when we are looking to the incidents which is happening in the Middle East, I think that that's providing more and more a darkness picture towards the future, at least, of our children. How the Arabs will be able to change is such kind of culture, I am not quite sure that this is something will come soon. No doubt that the ISIS itself is the product of the aggression and the oppression of the Arab Muslim dictator leaders. I heard just a few days ago the spokesperson of the Jordanian government said that ISIS came as a result of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinians. Come on, excuse me. That's lovely something bullshit here. That's exactly what bin Laden did in the United States in 2001 by saying that he bombed what he did against or the protest of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinians. Don't put on the Palestinians too much. I think that the Palestinians almost the most frustrated people right now in the Middle East. So the aggression and the oppression of the Muslim dictator leaders are the ones who brought Daesh or ISIS. And this Muslim dictatorship has been usually supported by Europe and the United States. So when we are saying today that the United States and Europe are the one who brought Daesh to the area, I think that all of us are quite right. And nobody can deny that. Now, we saw the spring, which became really a very hot summer in the Middle East. And I think that the Arab Spring almost made all of the Arabs so frustrated on their spring. No doubt that a secular, a strong dictator, this is what the Arabs really need. Look today what's going on in Egypt as an example. In Egypt, people are not looking for a leadership. People are not looking for a secular leadership. People are looking for two things: stability and a personal security. This is what the people are seeking. I was just 3-4 weeks ago in Cairo, and I asked a lot of people inside, in the middle of Cairo, what they think about their own situation. I think that people just want to cry. I think that most of the people in Egypt almost missed Hosni Mubarak. But when I ask these Egyptian people, where is the more safe place in the world right now, you couldn't believe. Everybody told me Israel. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we'd like to move on to Natan Sharansky.
Well, after such a strong support of the position of Israeli government, I'll try to be dissident here. You don't hear me? Do you hear me better? Okay, okay. There are so many questions each of my friends raised that I agree and so many that I disagree that I don't know where to start. But I'll take it where I think we all three of us agree. And by the way, that I will not make a secret, we with Basem are friends for 15 years. I think it's really amazing phenomenon that Palestinians are so strongly fighting against dictatorships in Arab world and in the Palestinian Authority. Dictatorship, whether stable dictatorship is good for peace. There is no such a thing as stable dictatorship, and I think Benjamin touched it. It's true that dictatorships can last for a long time, but it means that they will be more and more tough on their own people in order to last for a long time. And in the end, there is a big chance that some even stronger dictatorship will replace them. Dictatorship means that you keep your own people by fear, and you create enemies from your neighbors in order your people will be constantly mobilized in the struggle against common enemy. And that's why, by the way, no people, those who have in their culture the word democracy and those who don't have in their culture the word democracy, no people like to live under dictatorship. Because no people like to live in fear that if you or your child in school will say something wrong about regime, you or your family will be punished in the most severe way. And that's what creates this phenomenon of double think, that under dictatorships, people think one thing and say another thing. And when they described this phenomenon of double think in Soviet Union, I received many responses from Vietnam, from Cuba, from Eastern Europe, from Latin America, that we have absolutely the same situation of double think. And we live in constant fear. That's exactly what makes this desire for freedom of a civil society universal. Not the fact that there is no mentioning in Quran of pluralism, but the fact that, yes, Egyptian people who went to the Tahrir Square, if you Google Tahrir Square 2009 Palestinian question, you'll find zero connections. If you write Tahrir Square, that's what makes it, let's stop doing it, let's transfer $50 million but to Palestinians, and all that was, but that's Paris agreements. That was the idea that if Arafat needs pocket money to fight Hamas and to bring us peace, we'll give him this money. So not only he must be cruel dictator to control his people, he must be corrupt dictator in order he will be ours, and we'll give him money. And that idea, unfortunately, is very popular in Europe, in America, in Israel, until this day. Now we are all blessed Thanks God now there is a dictator in Egypt. Now we'll have somebody to work with to fight Muslim brothers. Of course we'll have somebody to fight. And you know, Churchill and Roosevelt made a deal with Stalin to fight Hitler, so it's okay. But always remember, it's not your partner for peace. It's your partner for this moment to fight the bigger evil. And now, whether, here's my point where I disagree with Benjamin. What America could do. Look, all those people who went on Tahrir Square and on other squares, and I am not speaking already about Iranian dissidents, who were the first, who before the Arab Spring, almost made a revolution in their country. They all feel, read what they are writing today on their blogs, how they are betrayed by the free world, by America. Some of them also by Israel, few of them who believed in Israel. Why? I'll quote one of them, Michael Nabil, you know probably him. Yeah. He said, we have to stop calling America and Israel as our allies. Why? Because allies are those who are with you when it is good and when it is bad. And we were with America when it was very bad, when we were tortured in prisons for our being true to these ideals. And look now whom America recognizes, whom America invites to White House, to whom she gives money. And you know, and if you ask why the free world doesn't recognize all these Democrats, the answer will be very simple. How many troops they have? We must have to support the real power. You know how many times I was asking in European countries who were telling me that they are investing big money in building civil society among Palestinians. I was saying, I have a friend, Basem Eid. He is a member of all these organizations. He has a program of promoting democracy in schools in Arabic. Can you give him some money? They say, oh, of course, great, we just heard him. But what Abu Mazen will say about it? I said, you know, I didn't write. Oh no, then we cannot support him. Then we'll support only those who Abu Mazen will support. Can you imagine if they would say, we will support dissidents, and Soviet Jews, only Brezhnev will say, yes, support them. Thank you.
So, we've got a bit of a contradiction here.
Yeah.
Do we have the patience for Arab democracy to rise by itself? What will that mean? What will that mean in the meantime?
Well, something about the patience. It's true that building civil society, by the way, when I'm speaking about democracy, I don't speak about elections, because democracy is free elections and free societies. Elections by themselves never mean democracy, and that's why this insistence that you see what happens, you give them freedom and they elect Muslim brothers. There was no civil society. It is the process of building civil society, yes, which can take 5, 10, 15 years. No, when I was speaking about encouraging civil society, you cannot impose on anybody. But you can have joint ventures supporting free economy. You can support programs of the universities, and you should not support anything else except from those who are for civil society. When I was speaking about it in '93, I was told by Yossi Biel and some others, we are going to have peace in 3 years. And what you're talking about 10 years? Then in '99, when Ehud Barak tried to make immediate peace with Syria, and I tried to connect it with the regime there and with democracy, he was saying, we need to make peace in 18 months, because then Clinton will not be the president, so we needed to have before. We cannot have all these projects for 5, 10 years. And so on, we continue for 20, 30, 40 years to make peace in 1 year. Yes, we will never have it. If you are now planning to have peace in a year from now, we will not have it. If we are ready to be very patient and to help to those in the Arab world who are interested in building civil society, yes, I think in 5, 10 years we can have a very different world.
Do you agree?
See, first of all, as an Arab, as a Palestinian, as a Muslim, I didn't really see such kind of things might come, so fast to us, unfortunately. If I want to take as an example the Palestinian case, in my opinion, I don't think that we, the Palestinians, are ripe enough right now to hold a state. And I'll explain why. In September 2005, when Ariel Sharon decided to disengage from Gaza, I think that Sharon in that time almost succeeded to put the Palestinians on a very big test in that time. That listen, we have the old Gaza Strip. We are going to disengage from it, and we are going to hold it to the Palestinians and to see if the Palestinians really will succeed to manage themselves by themselves. In my opinion, we almost failed in managing the Gaza Strip. In my opinion, we, the Palestinians, almost destroyed what remains from the Israeli occupation in Gaza. Look to Gaza right now, it's really a chaos. How the Palestinians are going to solve the Gazan issue, I don't think that there is any Palestinian right now who is able to do such kind of thing. There is a huge fight, friends, between the Fatah and the Hamas on the Gaza Strip. And don't believe that any reconciliation might bring these two kind of organizations together. Because there is a huge conflict between the politics of Fatah and the ideology of the Hamas.
Benjamin Pogrund, you have witnessed change happen in a society and the collapse of a regime that people thought would never happen. What can your experience, and what kind of hope can your experience give us for the Middle East?
There's a great deal of hope in that. And I go back on a personal point. I left South Africa in 1986 when my newspaper was closed down because we were being too successful in exposing apartheid and attacking it. And I left with a sense of despair. My friends were either dead or in prison or in exile, and I saw apartheid stretching out years into the future, no end to it. There's an Afrikaans phrase, kyk hoe lyk hulle nou, which means see how they look now. Within 8 years, it had gone, finished. And it wasn't because of internal circumstances. It was basically because of an external event which no one could predict, and that was the fall of the Soviet Union, because both whites and blacks lost their patrons in different ways, and they were forced to come to terms with it. And when I talk about the Middle East, and I talk in great gloomy terms, because I'm one of those who's full with despair about where we are and where we're not going, and ultimately when I have to face what can happen, I'm reduced to quoting the South African example and say, well, wait for some big external event which none of us can predict, but hopefully will happen, if not in my lifetime, because internally we're going nowhere. And if it's not too tangential, if I can just take a quick point, what Natan said about Oslo and Basem said about Gaza, I don't agree with either of those descriptions. I think there were other factors. Yasser Arafat and corruption, yes, totally agree with Natan. But we both screwed up on Oslo. Oslo was a major turning point. And the Palestinians screwed up by going on with violence and changing the whole nature of Israeli society and attitudes towards Arabs. And we screwed up by building settlements. We are equally to blame for the destruction of Oslo. Oslo was the way forward for us, with all its defects. And in regard to Gaza, well, I don't have that much praise for Sharon on that issue. He got out of Gaza for his own reasons, peculiar reasons, and we walked out and closed the place down. We should have negotiated, we should have sat down with the Palestinians, border control. Things like mosquitoes don't know there's a border. They cross over and carry disease, foot and mouth diseases. We simply walked out. And the Palestinians were stupid. They destroyed the greenhouses that were donated to them by American Jews. They looted the buildings we left behind. They were as stupid as we were inadequate in what we did. It could, no certainty, could have been a different story had we been more generous, more welcoming, and try to help the new state, which is, again, is happening with us on the West Bank now. We should be more generous, more helpful. And if I could just quote one thing, my very close friend, the late Robert Sobukwe, who was a leader of the Africanists in South Africa, he spent the last 18 years of his life in imprisonment of one sort or another. He was in solitary confinement on Robben Island for 6 years, but he was able to get a daily newspaper and medium wave radio, FM radio. And at the time of the 67 war, afterwards he wrote to me. He said, if you know Moshe Dayan, which I didn't, but he said, if you know Moshe Dayan, give him a message. Now is the time to wash the wounds of your enemy. And we have the strength, that's what we should be doing.
Would you like to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm glad my friend said something that I can agree, that we should be more generous. I'm always, when I was minister in the government, and now I always believe that we can do more and more, both for Palestinians and for Arabs of Israel. The question is how you're doing it, how you're doing it in order it will be good for not only for us, but also for Palestinians. And here, I suspect my friend is speaking about two things, that nobody could predict destruction of the Soviet Union, and that nobody could predict that Palestinians will turn Oslo opportunity into the terrorist activity. I think in both cases he ignores the relations between the citizen and the regime. I have to say, in 1969, my friend Andrea Malrik wrote a book, If the Soviet Union Will Survive Until 1984. Of course, he went to prison for this book, but in 1985, Gorbachev came to power and started dismantling Soviet Union exactly in accordance with his predictions. And in addition to him, after this, my mentor, Andrei Sakharov, and many other dissidents were predicting and explaining why Soviet Union will fall apart. How we knew it? We knew it because we saw that this is a regime which all the strength of it, all the power it is put in one thing, how to keep 200 million people under the control. And it was clear that at some moment, especially when the West will stop giving them energy, they will fall apart. Now, if to ignore this, simply to look at such a stable dictator, he will give us peace, of course you don't know, and that's why Sovietologists, until the last month of falling Soviet Union, couldn't predict what dissidents from inside were predicting 15 years before. Now about Palestinians. Of course, Palestinians, nobody could predict that Palestinians will be terrorists. But everybody, not everybody, those who want to see could predict, and you can read many articles, why Yasser Arafat, not Palestinians by the way, Palestinians really wanted free economy. And I, as the Minister of Industry and Trade, was negotiating how to give them more opportunities. But the leadership, Nabil Shad, who was my partner on the Palestinian side, they were interested only in one thing, how they can control people through economy. The last thing that they were interested to give them economical freedom, and the same in the other things. If this regime is interested that his people will be controlled by this regime, they need us as an enemy. I wrote it not now, I wrote it in 93, 2 weeks after signing of Oslo, that it will bring to more hatred of Palestinians to us, not because of them, but because of Yasser Arafat, who came as a dictator and he can survive only if his people hate us. So yes, we can do a lot for Palestinians and for Arabs of Israel, but only if we are helping them to have more freedom, economical freedom, other freedom, and not helping to their dictators to control them.
Just before we move to questions, Natan Sharansky, I'd like to ask you, you're quoting your book, you're quoting things you wrote more than a decade ago. I'm wondering how the Arab Spring and in the wake of the great hopes and the disappointments that came in its wake, how your views have changed.
Well, I have to say that my disappointments from the free world became bigger, that's for sure. And I'll tell you why. Those people who didn't believe that it will happen, and they are the first to be disappointed. They say, you see, well, they didn't think it will happen. They were surprised it happened. Now, see, you see, it's better if it didn't happen. When Arab Spring happened, what happened in Iran before Arab Spring, and then what happened in Egypt, and then what happened in Syria, it was all the proof that people are not ready to live forever controlled by fear from their dictators. What happened after this, and by the way, it also you can find it in so many sources. In my presence, Saadettin Ibrahim, Egyptian dissident, was explaining to President Bush. He asked, and your presence too. We organized a special meeting with the dissidents.
We weren't there.
No, in 2007. And Saadettin Ibrahim asks him, he spent 3 years in prison, Mubarak, why you support Mubarak? He said, otherwise it will be Muslim brothers. And we all don't want Muslim brothers, said Bush. And he told him, that is your mistake. The longer a regime like Mubarak will exist, and the longer the only option will be for Egyptians, Muslim brothers or Mubarak, in the end it will be Muslim brothers. Exactly as for Palestinians, if the only option is Yasser Arafat and Hamas, in the end it will be Hamas. And that's what's happening. So when revolution comes, and if there is no support of democratic dissidents, so the only forces which can survive and come to power, it's those who are most organized, and that's why they can live under the dictatorship in spite of this. And they have a lot of support from outside. So Muslim brothers were by far the most organized force, ideological and so on. And they were permanently getting a lot of support. The army was very organized and good support. So the only forces in the Middle East who were not getting any support were those democratic forces who made this revolution.
But isn't that part of supporting democracy, is that when you encourage and support another nation or individuals to pursue democracy, you don't get to choose for them? I mean, I'm sure many people here went out and supported the release of Anatoly Sharansky many years ago, and then you came out and became a politician, and they wouldn't necessarily have backed the same party that you represented in the Knesset. I mean, isn't that part of...
No, so I don't understand the question. Don't we have to impose on Egyptians for whom to vote? Of course not. Well, look, there'll be Muslim brothers and another dictator. Maybe there'll be 10 other dictatorships in the next 10 years. The question for the West is, who are your allies? And if you're supporting all the time, whatever the regime change is, only those who are ready to contribute to civil society, in the end there is the result. You have to stay with your allies. You don't, instead of this, the free world, including American administration, all the time is figuring whether it is already came the time to support this dictator or not. Muslim brothers were not recognized because though they were elected democratically, but look, they are Muslim brothers. And then American administration decided now we have to recognize them. And the week when they invited them to Washington, Egyptians started demonstrations against Muslim brothers. Why? Because that's exactly when dictatorship of Muslim brothers became so strong that their own people didn't like them. American administration decided they're strong enough, let's support them. People in Egypt decided we really don't want them. That's the problem.
Okay. What I'd actually like to do now is open the floor up to questions for our panelists. Yes, we've got a microphone coming, so just hang on.
Hello, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask on your last point, but potentially to all of you, what do we do in a situation, for example, like in Syria, when there isn't necessarily a clear side that is contributing or looking or seeking a strong civil society? What does one do in a situation like that?
Who'd like to answer? Basem.
I think that Syria is a very exceptional case here. Nobody understands exactly what's going on in Syria, except that 80 different parties are fighting each other. This is what I understood from the Syrian map. On the other side, listen, if you will ask me personally, I probably almost changed my mind by saying that the best is the remaining of the current president Bashar Assad. Because we almost aware about the so huge fundamentalist organizations who are acting in Syria. And I think that Bashar Assad right now looks like that internationally got a huge support by continuing his struggle in Syria, because looks like that he is fighting against the Muslims rather than against his own people. But looks like that also Assad almost is stuck in the mud here, like the other, Arab countries. And I am not quite sure that in Syria we are going to get, a kind of a peace or stability, I believe, at least in the coming 3 years. Thank you.
Well, nobody wants to answer this question at all. I disagree with Basem on one thing. If we now come as strong supporters of Assad, we will be hated by Syrians more. In the end, we will be accused in all this when this dictatorship will finish. On the other hand, in the beginning there was only democratic opposition. But the West was saying that Assad is a reformist, he's a person who is he has site on internet, he was educated in the West, and we can deal with him. It was said 2 weeks before the revolution in Egypt, in Syria started. So there was missed the opportunity. Today, there was missed opportunity to punish them for using chemical weapons. And today, I have to say frankly, when I met some democratic dissidents, Syrians, who were praying for, asking for help, I said, can you give me a map? What areas are controlled by Democrats and what by fundamentalists? Because I cannot ask anybody in the free world to support fundamentalists. They promised me, it's already half a year, they didn't send me a map. Because there is no way, there is no way really to separate. So that's why I don't think that today there is opportunity for the free world to say we are supporting this, we are on this side or that side. And I don't recommend for us to stand on the side of any dictator. We have simply to, any effort, even individual effort, which will be done to promote a little bit something human, something civil society in Syria, we have to be there. Exactly as we on Golan Heights are helping to the injured local population of Syria. But at this time, there is no way for the free world to take any side.
Yeah.
Okay. Question there.
I'd like to ask Natan Sharansky, is it Binyamin Tislachimani Bokoyan? Do you, if you claim that Arab society is tribal, what are the chances of that changing, and is there any possibility that tribal society can ever be social society?
You ask Basem?
See,
If I'll say it, it will be political non-correct. He can say it.
anything towards the Arab, I will answer it. But towards Israel, he should have to make the job. Now, no, I believe that we are functioning right now like it tribes. No doubt about it. no doubt about it. If I want to look right now, the whole relationship which is going on between the Gulf countries as an example, if you will take Saudi Arabia, if you will take Qatar, if you will take the Emirates, the Arab United Emirates, I think that they are dealing with themselves, no doubt, like tribes.
The question is there hope for change?
Yeah, now,
Civil society.
now let me continue, please. I think it's something which is looks like very applicable also to the Palestinians right now, because looks like that the Palestinians also, each tribe is seeking its own city or its own state or whatever you can call it. In Hebron, as an example, we have 2 or 3, probably the biggest families over there, that these people would like to continue ruling the Hebron district, as an example. And this is about Nablus, and this is about Jericho, and this is about Jerusalem also. Now, to change, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure that we can. I think that the word almost provide us a lot of help in terms to change is such kind of attitude. But as I said, that all of these things almost based on the culture. And how you can to change the society, I don't believe that you will be able to change the society without changing the culture. And by changing the culture, probably we need another 2 or 3 generations here.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're taking the short term. There's nothing new in human history about this. You take Europe. Europe evolved over the years. Tribes, families, clans, nation states, which changed. And a lot of blood along the way. A lot of people were killed over the centuries. And the Arab nations are going through it. So is Africa. Africa was created by the European powers, or divided up in the 19th century, and it's still trying to sort itself out. I think you used the word patience earlier. Patience.
I mean, maybe someone in the audience can tell us how many years it was between the French Revolution and democracy in France. But that wasn't 18 months either.
No.
A civil society started building before French Revolution. So Europe really spent like 300 years in building the society.
So that's not just your grandchildren, it's your grandchildren's grandchildren. Yes? Oh, wait, just wait for the microphone, please.
Mr. Eid, you say that
I'm not hearing you well.
so ISIS was born because of the poverty and despair of the people in the Middle East, in certain countries.
No, not exactly.
But Wahhabism actually was born in Saudi Arabia, and the reason why people actually subscribed to Wahhabism was because they feel that people in Saudi Arabia live this very orthodox way of orthodox Islam, and that therefore Allah will actually place blessings upon them, prosperity, if they were to also follow that sort of line of Islam, which is very orthodox.
Thank you. What I said exactly, I'm repeating, that ISIS is the product or the production of the Arab Muslim dictatorship leadership. These people has been oppressed, and these people has been the oppression and the aggression brought such kind of people like the ISIS. And I said that because there are some people who are claiming that ISIS is the production of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinians, which is not true at all. Israel has nothing to do with ISIS. It's far away from ISIS. So, now, why I said that? Because the Muslim dictator leadership in that period almost supported by Europe and by United States. So look, from such a huge support of Europe, what Europe almost got from its support to the Arab dictatorship. We know exactly what's happened in the last week in France, as an example. And that's reminding me also on a very interesting joke that two Jewish people met on one of the roads in Paris. So one tell his friend, listen, I am really worried about the future of the Jews in France. Then the other answered him, listen, I am even more concerned about the future of Europe in Europe. So that's exactly the question right now.
Okay. Last question. Sorry, no time for last question. I'm going to ask one question to all the audience before we finish. The question in the session was, can democracy and peace go hand in hand? Do people in the audience feel more hopeful having heard our panelists today? Can we have a show of hands, anyone?
Sorry if we provoke anybody of you, yeah?
I've never seen...
Can I throw in one tidbit about that? Many of you will remember the name of Donald Woods, who wrote about CBK. And Donald was in exile, Donald Woods. He was in exile in London for many years. And Donald used to say that he was always being asked, how long will apartheid last? And he said, it will last 5 years. And I've been saying that for the last 20 years.
Thank you, Benjamin Pogrund, Basem Eid, Natan Sharansky.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a quick announcement. Natan Sharansky's session titled Is Israel's Europe's Future, that is planned in the booklet for tomorrow at 10:40, has been moved forward and will take place at 9:20, same place here tomorrow morning. Natan Sharansky, thank you.
In fact, it's much longer.
Hi, sorry, we're going to get the room ready for the next session. So once again, can you please exit through the front doors only? Exit through the front doors only. Please move in the aisle so that we don't leave any gaps.
No, I haven't. It's at 4 o'clock.
How close you are? Your cousins?
Oh, I didn't I? Yeah.
Please exit through the front doors.
Oh, okay.
Please make your way down and fill up all the seats.